Hey guys, it's Shara from Woodshop Diaries, and with the holidays just around the corner, in this video I'm sharing 5 quick and easy gift ideas that you can make and give this season. Now, because I know that things are crazy busy this time of the year, I made these 5 gift ideas even quicker and easier than the ones that I shared last year. And just in case 5 ideas aren't enough, I've teamed up with 2 of my friends, Katie from House Full of Handmade and Annika from Annika's DIY Life, and they're both sharing 5 of their own gift ideas over on their channels as well. I will link both of their videos in the description below, but for right now, let's dive in and get building. The first project is a pair of simple salt and pepper shakers that I made from some scrap maple and walnut 1x2s. You could use any wood type that you'd like for this, and essentially I just cut 2 pieces of each wood to about 4 inches long and then glued them together. This makes a 2x2, so if you wanted to just use a 2x2 and skip the glue up altogether, that would work totally fine. Now it was time to drill out the cavities for the salt and pepper. I marked the center of the blocks and used a 1 1/4 inch Forstner bit to drill about a 1/2 inch deep. This doesn't have to be a precise depth. I basically just drilled this out a little to give me room to get my fingers into to remove and replace the stopper. So the cork that I bought to go in the bottom of these salt and pepper shakers is a tapered cork, and the biggest end is 0.87 inches. 7/8 inches is 0.875. So the cork would be smaller than the hole if I used a 7/8. So I guess I'm gonna go with the 3/4. Then I drilled out a 3/4 inch diameter hole in the center as far as my drill bit would go. Now, a quick note about the cork. In hindsight, I actually recommend using silicone stoppers instead of a cork, and you'll see why shortly. You can find silicone stoppers in tons of sizes, so if you wanted to drill a different size hole for your salt and pepper, you can certainly do that and just buy a silicone stopper to match. Once the holes were drilled from the bottom, I flipped these over and marked where to drill the holes at the top. So I went in and got a regular salt shaker just to see how big these holes were. And it looks like they are 5/64. So I got these corks on Amazon, and they're great little corks. They fit the hole fine. The problem is that even though I drilled this bigger hole out to get my fingers in to grab the cork, it's still a pretty small gap. It's kind of hard to grab. So I'm going to trim the cork just a little. Then I'm going to drive a little screw. And now that gives me something to easily pull it out with. And again, in hindsight, I recommend using silicone stoppers. I'll eventually swap these out, but I had already bought the corks, so they'll work for now. I blew out the loose dust from inside the shakers and thoroughly wiped them clean. And at this point, I realized that I had enough leftover 1x2, so I decided to make a matching napkin holder. I laid these pieces out on a napkin to give me a rough idea of how tall the sides needed to be, and then I cut 2 pieces of each wood type with ends mitered 45 degrees, and then 1 piece of each wood type with ends beveled 45 degrees. I glued up 2 triangles for the front and back using wood glue and a dowel pin. Then once these pieces had dried, I glued the little beveled pieces between them. And after a few coats of Minwax polyacrylic, this simple set is ready for gifting. You can give this gift as is or add in a pot holder or another kitchen accessory for the perfect simple gift for the one on your list who loves to cook. This second project is the most tedious of the 5 that I'm sharing, but I think it's my personal favorite. For the Connect 4 game, I have 1/4-inch plywood pieces that I will use for the front and back of the game board. I've got a 1 3/8-inch dowel rod for the game pieces, and then I have 1/2-inch plywood, just a scrap piece here that I'm gonna rip into 1/2-inch wide strips. But if you don't have 1/2-inch plywood or you don't want to cut these into strips, 1/2-inch square dowel would work all the same. Actually, if I had 1/2-inch square dowel, I would prefer to use that than this, but this is what I have. First, I trimmed my 1/2-inch plywood down into 8 1/2-inch wide strips. Then I trimmed my 1/4-inch plywood down to make the front and the back panels. I measured and marked out where I needed to drill the holes for 6 rows and 7 columns. There are a lot of measurements to note here, so I've detailed everything in the printable plans that I've linked below. I drilled all 42 holes at my marks with a 1 1/8-inch Forstner bit. I clamped the 2 1/4-inch plywood panels together so that I could drill the holes through both of them at the same time. Then I glued my 1/2-inch square plywood pieces between my panels. Since the dowel that I was using for my game pieces is 1 3/8-inch diameter, I used a 1 1/2-inch wide spacer block to help me space these out. That extra 1/8 of an inch allows plenty of wiggle room so that the pieces can easily drop into place between the dividers without getting stuck. I glued these up a few at a time because I didn't have enough clamps to do them all at once. And then I glued on the other panel. While the glue was drying, I cut 42 pieces of dowel rod about 3/8 inches thick for my little game pieces. Now I needed to build a storage box / stand for the game board and the pieces. I cut the sides and back of this box from scrap 1x3s and then used a 1x2 across the front. After I made sure that the board would fit, I assembled the box by gluing together the back corners. Then I screwed the 1x2 along the front. Now you can absolutely assemble this box 100 different ways. Simply glue and nail the whole thing together, cut dovetails, add splines. You can go as simple or as fancy as you'd like. At the end of the day, it's just a box. Then I glued a piece of 1/4-inch plywood onto the bottom. I added some 1x2 pieces to the inside of the box. Basically, I just cut and glued 2 of these in place first, then I placed the game board in and cut the other 2 to fit. Then I plugged my screw holes, stained half of my game pieces blue and the other half red, and finally applied a few coats of Minwax polyacrylic to the box and the board. This fun gift idea is perfect for just about anyone and could work just as well for decor as it does for game night. The next 3 gifts are all super quick builds, and I think this third one is probably the easiest one of all. For this simple book stand, I only used about 2.5 foot of 1x6 board, and in this case I used alder just because I love the coloring. This project is literally just 3 pieces, and I cut them all on my miter saw with a bevel angle of 30 degrees. You can certainly make your book stand a different size, and you could also use a wider board like a 1x8 or a 1x10 to make this deeper. My pieces here ended up being 13 inches, 9 inches, and 6 inches long. I glued and nailed the 2 small pieces together first, and while the glue was still a little wet, I sanded it to smooth out the joint. Then I glued and nailed this small piece onto the bottom the same way. I added a dab of glue into the nail holes and then sanded this in. The sawdust kind of mixes and makes a little wood putty to fill the holes. To finish up, I applied some walrus oil furniture butter to seal it. This super easy gift is made in under 15 minutes and is perfect for the bookworm in your life. You can gift this as is or pair it with a new book for a simple but practical present this season. This fourth gift is another quick but practical idea that you can make from just a few scraps. I used a piece of 1/2-inch plywood that I already had laying around the shop for the bottom. You can literally make this any size that you want, but my plywood piece was about 7.5 inches by 16 inches, so that's what I went with. I wanted to line the sides with 1x2s, but I didn't have any already cut, so I ripped a 1x6 into a couple of 1x2s. Then I trimmed these to fit around the sides of my plywood. Before attaching anything, I stained the bottom black. Now, this is completely optional, I just really like the two-tone look. Then I glued and clamped the 1x2s around the sides. Now, as kind of a side note, I'm staging this as a basic catch-all, but in reality, I'm making this for my dad as a desk organizer. My dad makes tombstones, and he uses these sharp picking tools to pick the letters out of the stencils. As part of this organizer, he wanted me to make a little cup type thing to store these sharp tools in, so I glued up a little box just for that. But this could also be used for pens and pencils as well. This is just kind of an optional part of the project, but you'll see it in the next steps, so I wanted to explain where it came from. So several months ago, you probably don't remember this, but I built a vanity and it had some of this fluted trim board on it. So I actually ripped the edges off and ended up with something like this that I used for the vanity, and then I had the edges that were just scrap. These have come in really handy on a bunch of just random projects. These are basically square dowels, but I just wanted to show you where these actually came from. But any kind of square dowel, or if you just want to rip your own thin pieces off of a 1x board, that's totally fine. You can divide this up however makes sense for you or whoever you're giving it to. If it's a desk organizer, you could make room for post-it notes, pins, USB drives, etc. And if it's for a catch-all, you can divide it up for a place for glasses, keys, a wallet, whatever. I just cut to fit some of these divider pieces and arrange them how I like them. Then I glued these in place, making sure that the little cup that I made for my dad would fit into one of the sections. Once it had dried, I sprayed a few coats of Minwax polyacrylic to seal it. This super simple gift is perfect for the one on your list who could use a little more organization. It would work great in a drawer, on a desk, or on the nightstand to empty out pockets at the end of the day. The final gift is, I think, my second favorite of the 5. So for this picture frame, I've cut some scrap pieces, these two, walnut and maple, to 1.5 inches wide. So these are basically just a 1x2. And then I've got a piece of alder and I've cut it to about 2.25 inches wide, which is pretty close to a 1x3. So any kind of 1x2 or 1x3 material would work great for this. And for my frames, I'm making 5x7s. That's the plexiglass size that I bought. And I got this pre-cut in a 12 pack off Amazon. Now, if you had a bigger sheet of plexiglass and you wanted to cut your own, you could definitely cut your own to whatever size picture frame that you need, or you can buy pre-cut ones in different sizes. So you'll need 2 pieces plus a picture for each frame, and these 3 things together are just under a standard general purpose blade width. So luckily I can just cut a slit in each of these boards and these will slide right into it. I made 4 different styles of these picture frames, and this is definitely one of those projects that you can very easily customize. But the first thing I needed to do for all of them is to cut a slot for the photo. I adjusted my table saw blade height to about 1/4 inch, then I ran my boards through. The first 2 frames that I made were with the walnut and the maple 1x2s, and both frames had 3 sides. I wanted to mix and match the wood types, so I cut the bottom piece with square ends from one type of wood, and then I cut the two sides with 15-degree mitered ends from the other type of wood. Honestly, I didn't measure a lot of this. I cut the bottom piece to about 3/8 inches less than the width of the plexiglass. Then I just eyeballed the height of the sides so that it looked right. You could absolutely cut the sides to go all the way up, only halfway, or whatever you think looks best. The main thing here is that the plexiglass fits into the frame. For the other two frames, I just cut two pieces to make each one. For one of them, I cut the side with a 15-degree miter so that it slanted backwards, and the other I just cut with square ends so the photo stands straight up. Once each piece was sanded, I simply glued them together. Now you could add some brad nails as well if you wanted, but I didn't bother. The main thing to pay attention to while gluing is to make sure that the slots are aligned and to remove any glue that gets into them. Once the glue had dried, I finished these frames with walrus oil furniture finish. This is a great way to gift your loved ones a framed copy of your recent family photo, or you could give your friend a framed photo of their beloved pet. These simple, minimalist photo frames are just such a great, inexpensive idea for anyone on your list. I really hope you guys enjoyed watching these ideas come to life, and I hope they gave you some inspiration to tackle your own gift list this season. Don't forget to check out Katie and Annika's gift idea videos as well for even more inspiration. I've linked them below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I would like to personally wish you and yours a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy building.